If you guys love Bad Day HQ, don't forget to check out Good Day HQ, available at youtube.com/gooddayhq. It features the best in reality television, travel shows, and just general fun stuff to bring a smile to your day.
Living near an ocean presents an opportunity to experience nature's beauty every day. However, nature can be fickle, turning great beauty into great devastation in what seems like the blink of an eye. When countries and cities face nature as a foe, there is little to do but survive the assault of the elements and rebuild in the wake of destruction. The Netherlands is a country renowned for its many forms of beauty. Tulips and windmills stretch as far as the eye can see. However, since the country's first days, it has fought a battle with the sea.
The land is lower than the sea, especially at high tide. The dike is a kind of a high road protecting the land itself against the sea. You must do something to protect it, otherwise it will flood it any 2 times a day.
In the 1950s, the Netherlands is primarily an agriculture-based economy. The southwest corner of the country is especially fertile and contains many polders, or sections of land. It is an area heavily dependent on dams and dikes to keep water from flooding the farmland. However, the dikes protecting this area are not in the best state of repair.
The way people considered the water made them somewhat reckless. They paid too little attention to the maintenance of the dikes.
In 1953, Stoffel van Maurik lives with his parents on a farm outside the village of Capella. 3 other siblings also live at home: Stoffel's older brother Piet and younger sisters Katrien and Sarge.
Capella was een gemeenschap.
Capella was a small community of about 100. Most were working-class people, laborers, farmhands.
Elsewhere in the village, 13-year-old Nelleke van Dienst lives with her father, Jacob, and her mother, Louch, and 3 siblings, a brother and 2 older sisters. Right across the street are Nelleke's maternal grandparents, Kees and Keitje Koopman.
My opa was 80 years old, and my oma 79. They lived in quite an old little house. I loved to go there. I used to go over once or twice a day for candy. I would also do some chores for them Saturday mornings.
In the winter months, severe storms often form over the North Sea. On Friday, January 30th, 1953, conditions are right for such a storm, creating a weather system that threatens England, Scotland, and the Netherlands. Overnight, the storm gains strength and wreaks havoc in the United Kingdom. On Saturday, January 31st, the storm continues southeast, bearing down on the coast of the Netherlands.
Saturday morning, around 9 o'clock, the first warnings were issued for considerable high tides for Saturday afternoon and the high tide on Sunday night.
1.5 kilometers from the sea, on a small flax farm near Ouwerkerk, 17-year-old Wim Kuiper watches the developing storm.
Saturday. During that day, the wind was cutting, fierce. The weather was rough and extremely cold. And already there was snow and hailstorms.
That evening, in spite of the weather, Wim and 3 friends go into town to play billiards. In nearby Capella, Stoffel van Maurik and Nelleke van Dienst travel separately to the same music concert.
Ik zat in mandolineorkest.
I was at a mandolin fest that Saturday evening. We went there with my brother and sister, my mother too.
Broer en mijn zus, mijn moeder ook.
Some 20 kilometers north of Capella, in the village of Nieuwe Tonga, Jacob Hoenendijk takes advantage of his military leave to spend time with his girlfriend, Heisha.
There was a hurricane storm, and night. I couldn't go home, so I had to stay overnight.
As the hours pass, the storm continues to surge, and the Dutch Meteorological Service issues the most severe warning possible for dangerous high tides. Already close to being overwhelmed, the dikes barely contain the raging waters. Around midnight, Wim Kuiper returns home from a night out with his friends.
En wij gingen met z'n vieren om 12 uur naar huis.
The four of us went home at 12 o'clock. Once outside of the village, we were unable to buck the wind. We had to lock arms to walk home. There, we said goodbye.
We hebben daar afscheid genomen.
In Capella, Stoffel van Maurik and Nelleke van Dienst return from attending the mandolin concert.
Dat is nog niet leuk, dat is nooit leuk geweest.
A raging storm is never any fun. But nothing ever happened, so we assumed that nothing would happen this time either. So we just went to sleep like always.
Slapen zoals we dat altijd deden.
En het gekke was, door al die storm, dat het...
Because of all that storm, the water level was the same, as high as it would be at high tide. That should have alerted people. That did alert a number of people. There was no emergency warning system, no disaster plan. The only way people were actually alerted was via the radio. That came by way of a weather warning. At least, it was a warning that one should count on a very high water. But that was only till 12 o'clock. At 11 o'clock was the last time it was broadcast on the radio.
The meteorologists here desperately tried to keep the radio in the air, but they failed.
Dutch radio signs off as scheduled at midnight. As the Netherlands sleeps, most are oblivious to the storm surge that is pushing the system of dikes beyond the breaking point. An unstoppable wall of water is about to be unleashed on the unsuspecting country. Saturday, January 31st, 1953. A ferocious storm over the North Sea is forcing water levels dangerously high at dikes all across the Netherlands. As the system of barriers against the water strains to the breaking point, the only mass warning system, Dutch radio, shuts down. It is now impossible to warn the country of the impending flood. In the wee hours of the morning, the North Sea suddenly rushes over the dikes in more than 100 places. Only a kilometer and a half from the coast, water floods the home of Wim Kuiper and his family.
At 3:30, my father woke us up, and we stepped out of bed right into the water. It all happened so fast, and there is only one thing urgently clear. You've got to get out. We had to hurry like the devil to the village.
Battling the surging floodwaters, Wim and his family arrive at temporary safety. 10 kilometers south of the Kuipers, a wall of water bears down on the outskirts of Capella, threatening Stoffel van Maurik and his family.
At that moment, of course, you knew you had to act somehow. And we still wanted to get on our bikes to get away, but the water rose so fast. There was nowhere left to go. Our house, that was really quite an old house, we felt we could not rely on it.
With water rising everywhere, Stoffel and his family arrive at the home of relatives and help them prepare for the flood.
In dat huis, bij die oom.
We arrived at our uncle's, a family of 6 like our own. And after we carried their furniture and things upstairs, my brother suggested we do the same in our own house.
Leaving his mother and sisters behind, Stoffel, his brother Pete, and their father return to the family home in an attempt to salvage their possessions. Once there, they realize they are trapped.
En het water steeg alsmaar.
And the water kept on rising. It rose to such a high level as to make going back to the other house, where my mother and sisters were, quite impossible. So we stayed there until the house was swallowed up from under our feet by the water.
Onder onze voeten door het water verzwolgen werd.
As Stoffel, Pete, and their father make it to the roof just in time, elsewhere in Capella, Nelleke van Dienst and her family face their own struggle against the torrential waters.
Mijn vader en mijn broer die gingen naar buiten.
My father and brother went outside to see what was going on, where they were met by a wall of water. We then grabbed whatever we could manage and fled to the attic.
The water rises in the blink of an eye, making even the attic unsafe.
Op een gegeven moment ging de voorgevel eruit.
We then went onto the roof of the kitchen. It toppled when I, the last one, got on. Then all of us fell into the water. And I remember thinking when I went under for a second time, if I go under a third time, I'll never surface again.
Ik dacht van, nou, als ik de derde keer onderga, kom ik niet meer boven.
Clinging to a chunk of roof, Nelleke and her family float at the mercy of the floodwater's currents.
Op het dak.
We drifted across the street where two neighbors stood on the roof, ready for us. They got us off that raft. All around us, houses disappeared, collapsed. On top of that house, with the water reaching the roof, you are thinking, pretty soon it'll be our turn.
20 kilometers north, in Nieuwe Tonga, water surrounds Jacob Hoenendijk and his girlfriend's family.
Somebody hollered in the streets, "Run for your lives. The water's coming, the dikes are breaking." We run outside towards the inland dike. We were up to a chest high in the water. We fled to a house on top of the dike in this great big wave. It just blew holes in the dike. And then the waves are banging against this wall on the bottom of the dike. And the whole thing was just going up and down.
Momentarily safe in an attic on top of the dike, Jacob watches helplessly as the flood consumes everything in its path.
It was just hanging on for dear life on eave troughs and sitting on top of roofs and waiting to be rescued. And then they just went like that. They just fell into the water and drowned. You can hear them screaming.
On top of their home, rising waters give little room for retreat for Stoffel van Maurik and his brother and father.
Zagen we dat om ons heen op Capelle?
All around us at Capella, all those houses one by one. You saw them disappear in the water. You didn't see a soul, but you knew the people who lived there. You knew they were inside, that they drowned then.
Suddenly, their own house collapses beneath them, sending all three into the freezing waters.
En toen zeiden we, moeten gaan drijven.
Then we began to drift, and the trick was to grab something you could float on. All of us did not float together. That was not possible, but every man for himself. It was so cold that I am still convinced that very few people can survive a cold of that magnitude. I just let myself go because there was nothing else one could do. I was constantly scared because it was the worst thing I'd ever experienced. That was the last thing, the only thing in my mind. You're waiting for the end.
The Netherlands, Monday, February 1st, 1953. A severe storm over the North Sea has produced a surge of water that overruns the country's system of dikes, flooding numerous communities. After the storm passes, thousands of square kilometers of land remain covered by water. For those who lived through the initial flood, survival still hangs in the balance. Trapped in his grandparents' attic, Wim Kuiper and his family can only wait as the flood runs its course.
There sat my grandfather and my father on the stairs, and my mother's father. They were also with us. My father opened the door. The water flowed out the door. The tension broke.
As the water recedes from the Kuipers village, more good news arrives when a rescue ship enters the nearby harbor.
On Monday, at about 3 o'clock, the Supra Ooster came sailing into the polder. That was the very first contact, and they took the first load of people, babies, older people and such.
Floating many kilometers from home, Stoffel van Maurik clings to wreckage as he bobs in the icy water. Completely alone, after being separated from his father and brother, he can only wonder at the fate of the rest of his family.
I was mired in an expanse of driftwood and debris accumulated there. But behind the field, I could see a dike. There was a dike. I searched left and right for boards or stuff that would float, that could serve as a sort of path, a bridge I could fashion to crawl over to the dike.
Stoffel manages to make his way through the water and debris and pull himself to safety on top of the dike.
I was unable to walk. The extreme cold had made my feet totally numb. I crawled onto that dike because people were working there. And one of these noticed me. They took me to the hospital in Goes.
In Capella, stranded atop a neighbor's house, Nelleke van Dienst and her family are finally rescued by another neighbor.
Dus we kwamen daar in die kerk en daar lagen.
We were taken to a church. They had the heaters on. I remember that so well. And we sat around those heaters. It was so nice and warm.
North of Capella, the water recedes enough so that Jacob Hoenendijk and his girlfriend and her family move from the home on top of the dike on which they've spent the night to higher ground at a nearby hotel.
There was no food, there was nothing to drink, and we were cold because it was below freezing.
5 days pass before rescuers reach Jacob and the rest of the group and take them to safety in a nearby town. By late afternoon Monday, February 1st, most survivors are reached. The first wave of rescuers comes from the flood-ravaged areas themselves.
And beginning Tuesday, helicopters arrived from the American Army and so on, and from Germany.
Within a matter of days, help comes from neighboring countries and from as far away as the United States. While rescue operations continue, the human tragedy becomes clear to the many who have lost loved ones.
En toen in dat ziekenhuis zat ik daar.
In that hospital, I was told that my father, he had also arrived safely. Instinctively, we felt that those who had not been seen anywhere, that they were gone. But for my brother, who was an excellent swimmer, I had, well, high hope that he would make it. But he didn't make it.
Toch erg veel hoop op gehad dat hij het wel zou halen, maar hij heeft het niet gehaald. Dat huis waar mijn moeder.
The house where my mother and sisters were had also collapsed. No one from that house had survived. There were 9 people in the house, and all 9 of them perished.
Die zijn omgekomen.
Nelleke van Dienst loses her grandparents, Kees and Keitja Koopman.
Mijn opa en mijn oma zijn dan verdronken.
My opa and oma, they drowned. They sat on a roof, and the neighbors saw my oma floating by. The following morning, she washed up at Rauwepolder, but my opa, he was never found.
The Netherlands suffers a terrible toll in the aftermath of the North Sea flood. 1,836 people perish, while more than 70,000 become homeless. The agriculture industry also suffers a crushing blow. 300 farms are wiped out, and more than 3,000 are heavily damaged.
Well, salt water kills everything. When the mess began to dry up, not a blade of grass, not a tree could be found. It was dead.
The total costs of the damage are estimated at a whopping $300 million. A formal investigation into the causes of the flooding finds that the dike system protecting the Netherlands is in need of a major overhaul. The Dutch government immediately launches the Delta Plan, a sophisticated storm surge barrier comprised of sea arms and dikes designed to better protect the Dutch coast from future flooding. Today, agriculture remains the backbone of Dutch culture, despite the country's modern bustle and industry. The North Sea flood of 1953 is commemorated in the Netherlands by a museum and local memorials in several communities.
Maar wat we nu fijn vinden, dat is...
The thing that pleases us most is the fact that after 51 years, for all the people who perished, that to commemorate February 1st, we now have a monument in Capella in their memory. And that makes us feel so very, very good.
Maar het is wel een verschil met mensen die het niet meegemaakt hebben en mensen die ook niet van hier komen.
There definitely is a difference between the people who lived through it, those who came from elsewhere. They don't have the awareness of it all, and they'll never comprehend how it was. Because one has to have experienced it in order to perceive it.
Er een gevoel biedt aan, laat ik het zo zeggen.
If you guys are preparing for the apocalypse or want to survive a disaster or just want to have a really awesome camping trip, check out the products we have in the links below. Just by shopping for these products, you help support Bad Day HQ. In fact, any shopping you do in Amazon while going through these links will actually help us produce more great content for you guys.